Welcome to the Friday Circle podcast, a collection of Islamic reminders and circles to recharge your Iman.
So, what we've done in the last 3 weeks is the third of the three-part series. We were talking about the conquest of Constantinople, which is modern-day Istanbul, which happened in 1453. And we said at the beginning that this whole story, which we're going to conclude today, inshallah, it started with a hadith. Who can tell us what the hadith was? The Prophet ﷺ said this hadith at the time when Constantinople was the capital of the Byzantine Empire. So you can say the empire made up of the Christians. And it was a superpower at that time. And he's telling the Muslims that one day you will conquer Constantinople. It will be yours. And how blessed, how wonderful will that leader be? How wonderful will that army be? Okay, and that was the hadith that inspired a young Muhammad Al Fatih. We also spoke about why Constantinople was so important. It was the capital of the Byzantine Empire. It existed for 1100 years before it was conquered, its defenses. And last week, we spoke a lot about how the battle unfolded and some of the techniques that were used. We've also spoken a lot about Muhammad Al Fatih and his upbringing as a youth. We'll touch upon that again today. We spoke about his ingenious idea to move the ships on land to conquer the city, and how this feat is sort of remembered through history as one of the greatest military feats in history. So we ended last week with the actual conquest. And this week, there's a few things I wanted to just touch on. And today will be, in the time that we have, it's not a particularly heavy session. I'm not going to sort of impart huge amounts of facts and information onto you guys. It's more a reflection of his quest, and obviously, most importantly, what do we take away from this? You know, what sort of things are we going to learn from this, inshallah, that we can incorporate into our own lives, okay? This is just a picture. I don't know if you see it because of the light. This is the sword of Al Fatih. This is found in the Topkapi Palace in Istanbul. Who's been to the Topkapi Palace in Istanbul? Yeah. Well worth it. I mean, going to Istanbul is well worth a trip anyway. There's lots of history there. And Palace has loads of things. Me and Faisal did a whistle-stop tour there a couple of years ago. And there's got lots of... I don't know if this is true. Lots of hairs of the Prophet ﷺ. Do you guys remember that, yeah? Like every 5 meters, there's like hair of the Prophet. And me and Faisal said, no man, every month the janitor just goes, tang, and just like, tang, just replace that one. Allah knows best if that's actually the hair. But there's lots of amazing stuff there in terms of the swords and the shields of the Sahaba. And there's this sword of Muhammad Al Fatih, which is also there. So after Muhammad Al Fatih had conquered Constantinople, he sent out letters to Mecca, to the Sultan of Egypt, to what existed of the Muslim world, seeing the news of this victory. And the next khutbah that was given across the Muslim world also celebrated this victory. And you can imagine for the Muslims who lived, they were now living in an era where a man, the Prophet ﷺ had prophesied, hundreds of years previously. He's now living in our midst. The Prophet ﷺ he said something, he prophesied something, and I'm living where this man exists, and he's done it. He's conquered Constantinople. So this was extremely joyous for the Muslims. And this was the culmination of the vision Muhammad Al Fatih had from when he was a very young boy. We spoke about his upbringing, and we spoke about his influence from two sheikhs. Who remembers their names? His two main teachers. Sheikh Shamsuddin was one, and Al-Qurani, right? So he had two main scholars. The first scholar, the name Sheikh Shamsuddin, he was vital in instilling in Muhammad a love for jihad, a love for fighting in the way of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, fighting against the enemies of Islam. War was commonplace at this time, and showing him that he could be this figure, inspiring him with this hadith. So you might think that now that Muhammad Al Fatih has conquered Constantinople and he's already started to establish and expand upon the Ottoman Empire, the Ottoman Khilafah, that this might be a time for him to sort of retire a little bit, just sit back in his palace, allow his commanders to push on. We knew that he'd already made the army, the biggest army that side of Europe. They had specialist soldiers, they had the latest. So, there's no real need for him to push on in the true sense of the word. He could just say, look, we'll consolidate and we'll keep things as they are. But he didn't do Muhammad Al Fatih. He'd achieved his dream, he'd achieved his vision that he'd had since he was a young boy. And he'd done this by the age of, how old was he when he conquered Constantinople? Do you remember? He was 19 when he became the Sultan of the Ottoman Empire. How old was he when he conquered Constantinople? Remember? 21 years old. 21 years old, and he conquered Constantinople. And so thereafter, if you'll see on this map, so in the red, this is what existed of the empire at the beginning with Uthman I. Okay, so the founder of the Uthmani Khilafah empire. And then in the, in the darker, getting the colors mixed up myself, subhanAllah. Yeah, in the darker colors was what Murad II, his father, achieved. And under Muhammad, he not only conquered Constantinople, but he expanded the borders of the Ottoman Empire in both directions. So they went into Greece, they took Hungary, Bulgaria, Serbia, and the Balkans and in the Crimean area as well, sort of in the Russian region. Islam grew under Muhammad Al Fatih. He's on his laurels. And another thing that he did was that he effectively modernized the Uthmani Khilafah. Okay, he was a forward-thinking person. So he built many, many schools. He built many hospitals. He built institutes for scholars and for poets. I mean, this is really forward-thinking if you consider the era that they were living. And we spoke a lot about his influence by the scholars, that he loved them. His fathers and grandfathers and great-grandfathers, they all had scholars close to them. You know, scholars who were confident to speak their mind and correct the Sultan whenever they felt an incorrect decision. So he did this so that the people would learn and the people, their hearts would to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. He also built administrative building and for the Navy. So this is a man who has achieved his vision. He's now moving on to the life. What else am I going to do? How far can I push this? Because I want to establish Allah on earth. Okay? And until we got to the year 1481. And this is when preparation made for an assault on more of Western Europe. This would have been France and Italy. It was at this stage that Muhammad Al Fatih, he fell unwell. And from this illness, he would actually go on to pass away. And this was to what remained of Christian Europe at the time, because they knew he was this sound of this knowledge of this great sultan who was conquering everything around him. And you know, why do we call him Muhammad Al Fatih? What does Al Fatih actually mean? That's not his name. The conqueror. So in history as Muhammad the Conqueror, that's his name. You'll never see anything else. You might say Mehmet Al Fatih or Mehmed the Conqueror, but he is known as the Conqueror, and that's what Christian Europe knew him as. And they breathed a sigh of relief when he died. And how old was he when he passed away? Have a guess. This is 1481. What year was the conquest of Constantinople? Do some maths. It was in 1453, yeah? And there's the film I mentioned last week called Fatih, 1453. So he's 14 years old and he's died. So in 49 years, he's Muslims, expanded the Ottoman Empire, and he's achieved something that for 100 years nobody could achieve. He conquered Constantinople. Reading about his life, whilst I've been sort of reading and this week I've been reflecting a lot actually in preparation for today, I came across this statement from Umar ibn Khattab, this statement, where he said, radiyallahu anhu, we were a nation until Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala honored us with Islam. Try to seek honor in anything other than Islam, then Allah would bless us. And when I read this, I immediately thought of Muhammad Al Fatih. Because this hadith, it resonates with us when we examine his life. The man was a king, but he didn't seek honor through kingship, right? He didn't seek honor through materialism, even though he had an empire and everything. He didn't seek honor through the advancements and the innovations that occurred under his rule, even though he could have. He didn't seek honor through the people were describing, like this is the man of the hadith, this is our great Amir, the Sultan, the leader of the Mujahideen, because he would fight in every battle. He didn't seek honor through that. He sought honor only through Islam, okay? And he did this by keeping himself close to the scholars, by keeping his compass straight, keeping his heart always attuned and attached to the pleasure of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And such was his love of the scholars, when they conquered Constantinople and they turned a great church, this was like the masterpiece of the Christian world. What's it called? The Hagia Sophia. They turned the Hagia Sophia. The first person to do a khutbah in that mosque was his Sheikh Shamsuddin. This is how he honored his Sheikh, to do that khutbah. And in essence, this is a man who, he built his entire life around hadith. And if you look at the wording of the hadith, it's not even a command to anything, is it? It doesn't say, do this or do that. Or it just says, you will conquer Constantinople. What a wonderful it will be, what a wonderful army that would be. Not even a command, but he felt so much that this is what he wanted to enact. In this book, which was the main reference for this series by Dr. Ali Asabi, he talks about some of his key traits. He mentions quite a few. And I thought it would be a disservice to not include some of these here for us to just touch upon, okay? And these were the main ones he mentioned. He said, how do we know he had knowledge? For those who were here in the last couple of weeks, what do we learn about him in his early life? So this was a young boy whose parents had decided that we're going to make our son amazing. And it meant sacrifice. He didn't get to play with other kids. He grew up a serious young child. He wouldn't like to be around jokers and time wasters. He wanted to be around people that were serious, even as a young child. So he memorized the Quran, science, physics, he learned about warfare, he learned history, he learned mastery of a sword, he learned how to ride a horse, okay? So 6 languages we mentioned that he learned. So his knowledge was there. His bravery, he fought in the majority that the Ottomans engaged in. Even after Constantinople, he is found in many, many accounts fighting with his soldiers. We learned on the last day of the siege of Constantinople, when the Muslims had finally broken the Great Wall of this cannon, and the Janissaries, the specialist soldiers, rushed in. Who led? It was Muhammad Al Fatih. He didn't need to. How strong was the army? It was like 200 strong. He had no need to be there. But he led by example. I'm there at the front line. And he fought with the Janissaries until Hassan, the commander, planted the Ottoman Christians, they surrendered. There was another story that Salabi mentions where the Ottoman army were fighting in the Balkans, and the enemy, the trees, and they were firing arrows at the Muslims from a distance. And the Muslim army had fallen to their knees and they were crawling to try to avoid being hit by the arrows. And they were really sure. Who was in the front of that army? Muhammad Al Fatih. They say that even though he was the emperor, the sultan, the leader of this great empire, he never knew luxury in his life. He didn't sit in a palace and beautiful women and food, grapes being fed into his mouth. None of that nonsense. And he knew harshness, roughness. He lived a life with his soldiers and with his scholars. And in that state, when the Muslims are crawling, it was Muhammad Al Fatih who got up, charged forward into the forest with his horse, and his other soldiers led by the enemy. We learned about his intelligence. Not the fact that he had knowledge, but he could apply that knowledge in pressure situations. Because in the midpoint of the conquest of Constantinople, the Muslims were struggling badly. Right? They were breaking the wall, and the Christians were just building the wall up again. Ships that were trying to get into the Golden Horn, they were getting dished. And his advisors said to him, "We've got nothing else to give here. Our best shot, we can't break through. Let's go back. Let's just call this off." And he refused. And that's when the idea came to him to move the ships on land. And they moved 70 ships in one night by the grace of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. We mentioned, what Salabi mentions as well, that he was decisive. We said that he removed his naval commander because the ships were being routed. He said to him, we're losing ground here on the sea. I need to see progress from you tomorrow or else. And the Muslims, the ships were not progressing. He removed him and put somebody else in. No blind loyalty, he was a decisive individual. Determination, we know, because 53-day siege. And everything that it threw up every single day, he'd have to battle through. And then it comes to sincerity. And Salabi in this book, I'm not included in the series because it's a little bit dry, but wrote many works. He wrote about his thoughts on military conquests, on the state, on welfare, on knowledge, on education. Lots of his works have been by Salabi. And he says what comes out of this is a man who of utmost. Everything goes back to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And there's a very famous statement attributed to Muhammad Al Fatih. When he was, how did he conquer Constantinople? And he said, I have two traits. Firstly, I have a heart as hard as rock that does not rest until I achieve what I want. And the second trait, I have an eye that cries of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So how can I not achieve victory? What a beautifully concise way to distill this man's character. This is how I win. This is why I'm successful. Because when I set my heart on something, it's like a rock. Nothing's going to deviate me from that thing until I achieve it. And along that way, all that way, cry to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala out of fear for him. My heart's always in the right place. And this is, what better way to describe him than the description that he gave himself. With what remains of the circle, I wanted to go in a slightly different direction. Ali Salabi, he mentions all of these traits. And throughout this book, about another quality that Muhammad Al Fatih had. Okay, something that he had that helped him to achieve what he achieved. It's a quality that we find in any achieved something great. Okay? It's a quality that we find in the greatest of creation. So who are the greatest creation, the greatest men to walk on this earth were? The prophets. So we find this quality in them. We find it in the greatest Islamic personality in history. We find it also in contemporary personalities. And we take a lot of interest when we try to learn about the lives of people that have achieved something great. We do it through the prophets, through our great Islamic personalities. We also have, though they're not even close, no comparison in terms of individuals, but we do learn also from examples. Okay, people like to know how someone has achieved great. Okay, I'm going to show you a slide now, which is a slide that shows you a set of books. Okay, I want you to look closely at these books. Okay, so if you can't see properly, we've got Che Guevara, Malcolm X, Nelson Mandela, Sir Alex Ferguson, Muhammad Gandhi, Barack Obama, and Winston Churchill. Okay, these books, I didn't handpick these, by the way. I didn't sort of think. I typed in on Google, best-selling autobiography, the best biographies of all time, and I looked at multiple websites and common books that came up, okay? People want to learn about lives of individuals that they think have achieved something great. They want to know what was their motive. How did they get to where they got to? What setbacks did they have on the way? What's their character like? Right? What inspired them? And there is something that unites every single person here. I use this as an example because I think it's interesting. Steve Jobs, for anyone who knows, I mean, Fassel or not, there's like reams and reams of case studies. Universities base their degrees, modules of their degrees, and Steve Jobs and how he achieved what he achieved. Same with Sir Alex Ferguson. We think of him in football, but he's done leadership courses at Princeton. Okay? All of these individuals have achieved something great because they're all people with vision. That's what essentially, we distill it down to one thing. What was Steve Jobs' vision? Yeah. Technology to make people's lives easier. You basically distill it down to that. We did Malcolm X only a few months ago. What was Malcolm X's vision? He was an influencer, Muhammad Ali. What were they both involved in? What were they fighting for? Yeah. So his vision was that black people would be treated equally with white people. Yeah. And he overcame many adversities, and the way he wanted to achieve the vision was different in the first phase to the second phase of his life. Vision. Anyway, we won't get into any more detail because these are just contemporary examples. These aren't people that I want anyone to aspire to, but it's interesting to learn from their lives. It really is. Because this idea of having a vision, if you were to ask me, this is what I've been asking myself in the last few days, okay? Like, if there's one thing I've learned from learning there, what would it be? If there's one thing you want to share with everyone that you learned from his life, it is this. That this man had a vision. He had a vision. And he said his heart is as hard as rock, because he's a man who would not let anything deep from achieving his goal. Every person who has achieved something great had a vision. The greatest people we said in history were who? Who were the greatest of all time? The greatest of creation on this earth were the prophets, yeah? And the Prophet ﷺ was the greatest amongst them. What was the vision? They're the greatest people, therefore they had the greatest vision. What was their vision? Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, what else would you say their vision was? To get the creation of Allah, yes, Suarez?
Spread the deen.
Yeah, absolutely. Their vision was to save people from the hellfire and get them into Jannah, right? And in Islam, subhanahu wa ta'ala, He wants us to have a vision. And not just any vision. He wants us to aspire to be great, right? How do we, in the Quran we know this? Because Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, سَابِقُوا إِلَى مَغْفِرَةٍ مِّن رَبِّكُمْ وَجَنَّةٍ عَرْضُهَا كَعَرْضِ السَّمَاءِ وَالْأَرْضِ. He says, سَابِقُوا, compete with each other, race with each other towards forgiveness from your Lord and a heaven that's as wide, and the paradise as wide as the heavens and the earth. Allah doesn't say, just get to the finish line, or just try your best, just get there. He says, compete with each other, be the first, be number one. What did the Prophet ﷺ say about when we ask for Jannah? What do we ask for? Firdaus. Why? Why would he say that? He said, when you ask for Jannah Jannat al-Firdaus, right? Highest of Jannah. It is the middle of Jannah, and it's under the throne of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. This idea that as Muslims, we should be people of lofty aspirations. We should have a vision which is very high. Okay? We can all maybe agree, all of us want to get to Jannah. And all of us want a comfortable life in this dunya. That's a perfect vision to have. Unless you plan to have how you're going to achieve that, year and year will go by, years will go by, and you'll never ever get closer to your target. I'll ask all of you to ask yourselves, who here has ever sat down and written on paper your vision is in life? In 10 years, I want to be in your career or in your Islam or in your Quran or with your family or with your earnings or whatever. How many of us have ever done this? This is incredible, because if I show you these people, all of these people are there for the dunya. Our vision centers around the what? The hereafter. So is that not more deserving of having a vision about how we're going to... And I want to just share with you, brothers, this book that is a very, very interesting book. This is a good example of where you need to look past who the author is, because the author is not someone anyone's a fan of, Alistair Campbell. I won't go into who he is for the sake of time. In this book, Alistair Campbell, he conducts interviews with people, leaders of almost any politics, sport, business, arts, entertainment, music, you name it, everyone, people that are considered the best in their field. And he found what he learns from them, common themes that he sees in all these people. And guess what, brothers? Every single person who he interviews, every single one of them has a vision. And they all start by telling him, when he asks them, how did you get where you are today? I had a vision. We set this goal and we work towards this goal and we change the vision. We push it even higher when we can. Okay? This series, and I want to end this reflection, the vision of Sulaiman alayhi salam. So we'll go about the people that we should truly aspire to be like. Okay? The best. Sulaiman alayhi salam, he says to Allah Rasulullah, he says, forgive me and give me a kingdom, the like of which you will never grant to anyone after me. Truly, you are the ever giving. Okay? This is the vision of Sulaiman alayhi salam. What do you learn from this vision? What do you learn from what he's asking Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala? When it comes to making your own vision, what's... Yes, Suarez?
Don't be shy, ask for the best.
Okay, mashallah, excellent. Don't be shy. Ask for the best, because he's asking for something very big, isn't he? Alayhi salam. Babir? Yeah, in your vision. Something that no one has done before you and no one will achieve after you. Anything else? What do we learn from these words? This is a skeleton, this is a structure for all of us to compile our own vision. The first thing he says is, my Lord, forgive me. So the first thing is his vision is about what? He wants forgiveness. He's thinking of the hereafter to begin with. So his vision is centered around the hereafter, number one. Okay? Number two, he said, Allah, give me a kingdom. Who was Sulaiman's father? Okay. What did Dawood do in this world? What was his role in this? On the Prophet, but what else was he? King. Dawood was a king. Sulaiman has grown up with a king. So Sulaiman has grown up learning how to be a... He's got that knowledge, got the skills to be a king. So he's saying to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, give me a kingdom. Because he's looking at himself. What skills do I have? What's my passion? I can lead. So Allah, give me a kingdom. I'll lead that kingdom. And through that, I will attain your forgiveness. And the third we learn from this is what Suarez was saying. He doesn't just ask for a vast, great kingdom, a kingdom that will make me happy. He goes for something which is near him asking for. Give me something, Ya Allah, that you will never give to anyone. And what was unique about the kingdom of Sulaiman? What did Allah give him? Because of this dua, what did he get? What was his kingdom? He had an army of animals. What about the animals?
Controlling the jinns.
He could control the jinns. He could speak to the animals. This is unheard of. Right? This is all because of this. So when we look at the vision, our vision needs to be powerful, to be something really ambitious, that every day it makes you think, it affects how you think. It needs to be achievable. You need to know that I can get there. It's not beyond me. I know I can get there even if I can't get there now. It should be something that motivates you, okay? That every time you think about it, it fills you with energy, that I'm going to do it, inshallah. You know, your vision might just be, in 1 year, I want to learn 10 juz of the Quran, for example. And it will do all these things for you. And the last is a stretch goal. That's a term for what Suarez was talking about. Something that stretches your thinking. It's not something you can easily get. You know, a vision can't be something like, my vision is that in 6 months I want to earn £100. That's nonsense. You know, you could do that in a week, for example, right? How about in 6 months I'll earn £10,000 through my business of selling honey? So my point being, it's something which stretches you. It shouldn't be something easy. And it has to be something measurable. You can't say my vision is I want to be the best Muslim I can be. That's lame. That doesn't mean nothing to no one. Okay? Be specific. So this is not meant to be a vision workshop or anything. But just the point I learned was from this book, from this man, I'm really pleased with him. And you know, hopefully we take so much benefit from his life, because his life has really made me reflect. And this is the one key thing I've taken away. I just wanted to, he's a man of vision. Okay, like the greatest people that walked on this earth, he had a vision. We should all be people of vision, lofty visions. And it might mean that at some point tomorrow and this weekend, you might just want to take a bit of time out and just think about what you're doing with your life. Where am I right now? What's my skills? What's my passion? And where do I want to be in 5 or 10 years? It doesn't matter what age you are, anything like that. What do you want to achieve, to attain, thereafter? So I'll leave you, as I said, we'll end with the hadith as well. The Prophet ﷺ, he said, in the hadith in Ahmed, verily you will conquer Constantinople. What leader will her leader be, and what a wonderful army will that army be. This was the life of Muhammad Al Fatih. He lived and became the realization of this hadith. I hope brothers have found this beneficial. Inshallah, hopefully what we'll do, building on from Abdul Hamid speaking about the Khilafah and Islamic history, and we speaking about connecting back to our Muslim heritage. In the next few months, hopefully we'll cover where we'll be looking at how Islam created the modern world. This is all part of us trying to understand what is our heritage, what is our tradition, because we are leaders, we are pioneers on this earth. We just don't see it. We've been cut, and inshallah, as we come to circle regularly, we'll start to reconnect to that.
Thank you for listening to this episode of the Friday Circle podcast. If you want to enjoy more, visit fridaycircle.co.uk. Wassalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.